Yeah. Oh, there we,
Oh, okay.
streaming. Great. Thank you. That's all you need is to say, Jeannie. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Senate Education, Wednesday, May 5th, 1:07 in the afternoon. For those watching, please know that we are having some, the legislature is having some IT difficulties. So if we disappear without indicating that we're about to do so, it is due to those difficulties, and hopefully we'll be back on soon. Prior to going live, I was asking senators to please hold tomorrow at 9 a.m. In case we have any additional amendment or an amendment to consider on H 426. So, and I'll be in contact with colleagues about that if we need to pull together a quorum. On that topic, we're going to return to H 426 today. We are also going to return to H 106. And then we will take up our work on H 183, an act relating to sexual violence. Senators will recall that Senate Judiciary has asked us to take a look at a section of that bill as it passed the House. And we will have Ms. Childs from Ledge Council take us through that section today, and we'll hear from Sarah Robinson, Deputy Director of the Vermont Network Against Domestic Violence, Wendy Koenig from the University of Vermont, and Patricia Turley, Ledge Counsel for the Vermont State Colleges. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Englander back. Senators will recall we had Mr. Englander in yesterday to talk to us about how we can get to a solution on requiring all schools to test for radon and PCBs. And we are also working with the Federal Agency of Education. Our state agency is working with them, and I believe our Joint Fiscal Office as well on this question. But we left it with you, Mr. Englander. You were going to take a look at a couple of different avenues that we might consider. And I'm wondering, I know you may not have a full update, but I'm wondering if you would take a moment and let us know where you are at this point.
So good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is David Englander. I'm the Senior Policy and Legal Advisor to the Commissioner of Health. I do have some numbers. I do want to start with a few caveats, possibly several caveats. One is these numbers were pulled together rather quickly as staff are fully deployed to COVID. I've not had an opportunity to speak with my colleagues at DEC or the Agency of Education. So these are very rough numbers. They're approximate numbers. I also have to note that, of course, this is not accounted for in the governor's budget, but I am responding to the committee's request. My numbers are based on the testing for radon. I don't have numbers for PCBs at all. That is slightly more complicated. So, Mr. Chair, would you like me to sort of briefly walk you through the numbers? And I also have answers, I think, the other committee's questions as well. Tell me how you want to proceed.
I'd appreciate you walking us through the numbers. And senators, let me just mention, so the reason we are reaching out to the Federal Agency of Education is we are trying to see if, for example, this committee were to decide to mandate to schools, simply say all schools must test for radon by 2023, all school districts, supervisory unions, what have you. Can schools then go in turn use their ESSER funding for that? And that is what we are waiting to hear back from the Federal Agency of Education on. It seems to me, and again, I don't know for sure, but seems like something that this committee and I believe the Senate as a whole is willing to support. And now, so we're just looking to see how we might get there with regard to funding. And so if Agency of Education at the federal level were to write back and say yes, I think we've got a good solution. We put forward a mandate and say, ESSER funds can be used. We don't even need to mention that. We just say that all schools need to test and make their results public by 2023. If that's a no, then we are going to be looking at, of course, other options. We can still go ahead and say, do it. It would be a mandate from the legislature. It's one that represents public health, but the schools would not necessarily have those funds to use And I don't know about whether or not, schools, how restricted they are with ESSER funds. In other words, can they, put things in one area that can address COVID and that frees up other funds? That's not sort of for us to determine, but so that's where we are. So Mr. Englander, you're coming back to us with numbers as it relates to how much it would cost and and also staffing, I believe. So
Yes. So these are the programmatic costs that would, for the Department of Health to run a testing program. Understanding, as I mentioned yesterday, that unlike testing water for lead, the public health lab itself doesn't do the testing. So we would be
I understand.
in contract with us or the Agency of Education. So with that, the cost for the first round of testing, and this is based on conversations with consultants and our own experience. It generally takes between 5 and 25 hours, depending on the size and location of the school. I should stop and say my numbers are based on 450 schools, because we talked about whether there'd be an exemption or grandfathering. But I thought if I give you all 450, that you and good folks at JFO could sort of do the math on how you adjust that number if necessary. So based on 5 to 25 hours, depending on the location size of the school, the cost would be approximately, the first round would be $640,000. That's just for the work. The typical cost per kit is $25 to $35 per unit. An average of 36 kits have been placed in schools historically. So that is, that's approximately $485,000. There will be a need to do follow-up testing, because where there are elevated levels, they go back and they put a different kind of sensor in for that's slightly more sensitive, that runs for slightly longer. And the estimated cost for that would be $200,000. The staff, we'd need 1.25 FTEs who want to do the programmatic work and want to do communications out to schools. And the total for that, the total cost for 1.25 FTEs would be $170,000. For an IT portal that looks very much like the LED IT portal, which if folks have been to is excellent and simple to use, that would be to build it is about $50,000. So the grand, very approximately, very rough total is $1.5 million. And I can send you an email kind of with that broken out.
Yeah, no, we'd appreciate that. And this would get us to everyone tested by when?
In consultation with consultants, they think they can probably do that in 2 years. The issue is that it's not only, and I think I didn't say this yesterday, it's not only during the school year, but it has to be done during the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fairly short window. But they think that with the number of consultants in the state, which I believe is 13, it can probably get done in 2 years, in 2 winters.
Great. So if I may just jump in first, Senator Chittenden, and ask a quick question. And this Senator Lyons actually might be able to help us with this. Do you have ARPA funds that we can use toward this? Or are we in the same situation that we are with RAID, with AOE, that either we've got to check in with the feds, which might work out well, or we need some kind of, as Senator Lyons mentioned yesterday, some kind of epidemiology report that makes a connection. Now, having gone through just my total layperson Google info last night, this is such a serious issue for those people that are working in our schools. And without a doubt, it can cause problems, which of course we know people with lung issues, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, are more susceptible to COVID. So it just seems like this is something that we could and should do. But I don't know, Senator Lyons, you've been more in the thick of ARPA funds as it relates to Department of Health, or Mr. Englander, is there a way to use ARPA funds for this? In the next budget. I mean, as I think we all know, we're going to be returning in January. I'd prefer not to wait until January, but we're going to be looking at additional ARPA funds then. Is that something that we can use for this?
So my understanding is that we don't have available funding for this kind of work, but I'm happy to go back and have a more detailed conversation with our business folks.
That'd be great. Okay. Senator Lyons.
Yeah, no, I think, well, we'd have to look at the guidelines as well through joint fiscal and others, and then determine whether or not infrastructure dollars could be used for this. And I have no clue about ESSER funds. So, I mean, I don't think any of us at this point know
Right.
how far how far guidelines might go.
Oh, Senator Chittenden, please.
So I'm curious, this is a new guy question, but I'm comfortable doing those still. This has come up before and we have not done it. And I'm guessing it's partly because this dollar figure has come forward. And I'm wondering if anybody has institutional knowledge of what we're likely to discover next as we go further down this rabbit hole, which is there just not enough overwhelming evidence that it's worth doing this test, that even if we get these results back, it's not going to change our course of action or inform anything? Or is this the time, now that we believe we have potential pots of money coming from the federal government, that we definitely need to have this testing occur? I'm just curious if anybody has any perspective from previous discussions as to why we haven't done this prior to now.
Yeah, so this is a somewhat new discussion for me, being back on this committee. I don't think it was covered when I was on the committee before, but I think your point's well taken, which is, if ever there's the time, given this influx of funds and given the possible infrastructure dollars coming, no time is in a way better. Senator Lyons, you want to
Well, if the question is, should we do it? Is it worthwhile doing? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
And if you find radon, then especially the employees, the environmental services, janitors, teachers, librarians, principals, all administration, they're all going to be consistently exposed to radon. So it's worth doing. But the pushback, of course, is money. And if we've got money, and we have opportunity, then we probably should do it. My question, I guess, the other question I have, and David, I don't know if you looked this one up, but the issue around liability for not acting once a test is completed. Do we know anything about that?
So to be honest, Senator Lyons, I wouldn't research that specific question. That's really for alleged counsel, because it's a liability question.
I know.
I have a different client.
I understand that, and I think ultimately it's us, it's AOE, right? And yeah, I get it. I just wondered if you happen to have from your perspective.
I think, as I said yesterday, it really would depend on the nature of the finding and what people knew and what the damage was, if any.
Sure, but yeah, you can't find the causal link to either, because you don't, it's just so difficult.
Right. If I may address briefly the previous question, though I know it wasn't addressed to me, but I have.
If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Englander, just hold that thought until Senator Chittenden had to stand up.
Well, thank you, David, and I'll definitely go right back to you. To Senator Lyons' point right there, I would definitely think that we hold that liability by not testing just as much as if we test and then to not do anything. So that to me is still, let's do this testing. Then the other comment, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Mr. Englander, is in my limited experience, I'm just going to keep saying new guy for another month or so, and then I will stop. It seems like finance or Ways and Means might better, they're going to have to wrestle with how to pay for this anyway. So if we as an education committee say this should be done, now's the time to do it, is it inappropriate for us to just punt it over to them to figure out how to pay for it? With that, I'll stop talking.
So I can take part of that. If just because the budget is where it's at, I mean, we could send it to approps. I don't know what they could do at this point, since they're kind of moving toward a committee of conference. The only possible thing that I see there is adjusting what the $5 million would be used for that's in the Environmental Contingency Fund. Again, I don't know how people came up with that number, but if PCB testing is going to cost, and I don't know, 1.5 million, is there an additional 2.5 there to do this kind of work? And that we can certainly look into. If we were to just say, and this is where I'm kind of leaning, is schools, we need you to do this. If that's where we have to go, then I don't think then it could probably just go to the floor. So, Mr. Englander, did you want to add to that?
So just very briefly, that because I've been in some of those conversations in front of Senate Ed and other places talking about radon testing. One is the availability of funds, and also there's a certain there is uncertainty as to the cost of remediation, which can be very high, as we've discussed previously, in contrast to when you have a lead faucet that's creating exposure. I had one other really insightful point. What could it possibly have been? It's gone now. I guess I would like to think that some of this is informed by, I think, that the success of the water testing program as well, which has gone, as this committee knows, extremely well. So with that, I'll.
Right. Mr. Englander, is this something that the administration fully supports, no matter what direction we might go in, given the massive health concerns and the postponement that we've experienced over the years?
It's not something I've been able to talk with the administration about.
Okay.
I made them aware of my testimony, but we haven't had an opportunity to meaningfully discuss it, and I didn't get the numbers until about 45 minutes ago.
I completely understand, and we understand the pressure you're under. If you wouldn't mind reaching out and getting
certainly will
that information and coming back to us with it, that would be great, and we'll certainly have more information as well. Any other questions for Mr. Englander at this point? I think my final one would be, we did talk to you about the possibility of there being some kind of epidemiology report out there that might support using ESSER funds for radon testing. Were you able to find anything, or your colleagues?
I wasn't able to find anything. I spoke to my colleagues. They weren't aware of anything. They did make the point that, of course, I mean, the danger with radon is lung cancer. And so, of course, somebody with lung cancer is going to be much more susceptible to severe COVID,
Sure.
Because they're compromised. And if I may, the committee had a couple other questions. I did get those answers. So I don't want to presuppose anything, Mr. Chair.
No, please. Please go ahead. Senator Perchlik, before Mr. Englander goes, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to ask, I assume he's going to answer one of the questions that I asked yesterday, so.
Okay.
I am, Senator Perchlik. So the EPA recommends 5 years, not 10, but a 5-year testing regime. And they also recommend, and this is something that perhaps we can discuss at a later time, is that if there are changes to the HVAC system or to the geology of a place that retesting occur. In the same way that when there's changes to plumbing, you'd want to retest for exposure to lead. To Senator Lyon's question about being able to prioritize based on geography and geology, the answer is actually that that's actually, while it makes sense, in fact, you could have a school that has an excellent HVAC system and be on what I'm going to call a hot spot. It's probably not the right term. And the HVAC system could be compensating for the amount of radon that's moving through the air. And you might have a place that's, has a low amount of exposure, or lowish amount of exposure, but their HVAC system is inadequate, and you might have higher levels of exposure. So in fact, it was the opinion of the environmental health epidemiologists that geology and geography would not be a good way to prioritize schools, to prioritize testing, excuse me.
But the HVAC system needs to be improved for COVID, so we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Precisely.
Not that we want to kill birds, but
I was going to say.
yeah, I know. Bad analogy.
Feed 2 birds with 1 seed.
Yes.
There we go.
Thank you.
I like it. Additional final comments, Mr. Englander, before we ask you to touch base with your colleagues about the administration's support for this, and hopefully you might be able to, I don't know how much time people need to consider that, but we are going to be in committee for a while this afternoon. It would be great if you could let us know. Senator Perchlik,
I did another question.
please.
Mr. Englander, can you remind us how many schools have had the testing? You probably don't know within the 5 year, but did you say yesterday it was 100 and something?
Yeah, it was 101 have gone through the voluntary testing. And I don't,
About
and
a quarter
I
of
don't
it. Right. You don't know how many fall in the 5 years, but do you know, so that's about a quarter of the total?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And may I, Mr. Englander, could you tell us how many of those had elevated levels of radon?
I was trying to dig that out of my memory. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I provided in my earlier testimony. I do recall that there was significant probability that we would find a number of elevated readings within schools based on our experience.
Okay.
You'll forgive me for not having the number off the top of my head.
It's okay. Thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Englander before he goes back and touches base with his colleagues in the administration? Again, we would really appreciate you looping back to us this afternoon, since we do hope to, I think it's the committee's intention is to take this step, and we're still waiting to see how it might happen and most effectively, but we would like to know where the administration stands.
I will do my very best to get an answer.
Thank you. Mr. Fannin, thank you for being with us. You know that the topic that we are considering, you have been, it's been considered now for several years, and this would basically be in H4 26, we would amend it to require radon testing in all of our schools. So the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. And to the committee as well. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to testify here today about the amendment, the radon amendment, as I'll call it, on 426. Again, Jeff Fannin, Vermont NEA Executive Director. So I don't have a lot to say other than we do support the notion of testing for radon in schools. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? We've got a lot of little kids who have developing lungs in schools, young people who are developing lungs, particularly, I would imagine, I'm not a doctor and don't play one on TV, but I imagine that their lungs are more susceptible to things being introduced that we don't want introduced, as well as, educators who are working in the building day in, day out for, 20, 30 years. We don't want them exposed to this harmful gas. So I think for that reason, we ought to at least know what the issue is that we're facing. So we got to test for it. And I think that's important step number one. And it's along with the lines with the school construction bill, the underlying bill. It's getting an assessment of what's out there, what are the needs. And this should be, for me, this is, Vermont NEA supports getting a handle on what levels of radon we're dealing with. So it seems tied together. It's a good bill, a good amendment to add to the bill. And the other piece, I listened to the conversation with Mr. Englander and all of you. I'm gonna, NEA does have somebody, as a result of COVID, we brought on board under contract, I guess, at NEA in DC, an industrial hygienist. So I'm gonna ask that person whether there is a correlation between radon and COVID and how we can, how it might work its way into the federal ARPA monies or other monies from the feds. So
We would
I'll
really
ask. I don't know that I will get an answer anytime soon, but I will try.
Yeah, no, we'd appreciate that very much.
So with that, I'll stop. Happy to answer any questions, but I do support it. And I think it's as well when you do the HVAC work that is being done. I think this makes a whole lot of sense. The timing is really good, I think.
Questions for Mr. Fannin? Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, private world, if you will, I think an employee would march down and say, this needs to happen, and folks, things would start rolling. And I think we need to have that exact same response, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
This is, you
When
know,
you buy a house, have to get it tested for radon and,
children, teachers.
yeah, you
yeah.
do, and if it's there, you either don't buy it or you get it repaired. Somebody fixes it, so. We don't
Right.
sell schools that often.
And you can get your tests through the mail. You know, they send you the tests through the mail.
Yep.
I'm just questioning, you know, as far as somebody to go out and put these tests kits in the schools, couldn't they just send them to the schools and have the, you know, janitorial staff or somebody put them out? I mean,
Yeah, we want to do it well.
What's the
We gotta
money?
do it, but we gotta do it right.
Right.
It may be different in a school building than it would be in your home, but I think that's something that's a hurdle we can easily get over and figure that out.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, and obviously they have 101 schools already have tested.
From where I'm sitting, we do have an amendment drafted, give schools 2 years. And as we are working on this, and I'm not sure exactly what the current amendment says, but basically give schools 2 years. I'd like it to go tomorrow, to be honest. I'd like to figure out all this financing so that we can wrap it up tomorrow. Even if we don't figure out all the financing, I really think this needs to happen. This is, I think Senator Chittenden mentioned it. You know, we have to do this, and we want to do this for all the right reasons. And there also are legal reasons that this has to move forward. And I am inclined to think that we would get the support that we would need.
So can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So this is, I don't know whether it's rhetorical or accurate or whatever. So if we put in that all schools must test by X date, and we don't say a word about money,
Yeah.
what happens then? Does this sort of trigger finance? Does it trigger
Yeah,
appropriations?
so that was sort of my intention, which again, doesn't mention money. We did something like this already, and it just went right to the floor. I can't remember what it
you're
was.
right. What was it?
Menstrual products, it's an unfunded mandate. So with the
Oh, yeah.
menstrual product requirement, we didn't come up with the money. We're basically saying school districts, you got to do it, but they
You're right.
still did a financial analysis of what the implications are to it. So unfunded mandates, as much as people like to, they have a bad rap, they do accomplish important things like radon testing. So
Yeah.
Well, and they'll also encourage some creative solutions and identifying funds, working with DOH or
Yeah.
somebody.
Any other comments on this? Okay. So I'll work with, yeah, please, Senator Chittenden.
on that point to Senator Lyons with an unfunded mandate, my understanding then that would just put it into the ed fund. So that would just raise the amount of money spent drawn from the ed fund. And I don't know how that factors into alternative funding sources, but that's where, again, I'd look to our colleagues over in finance or Ways and Means to better inform that discussion.
So it depends on so would we just have this be effective on passage? Yeah, but then the timing for it is over what? How many years? Senator Campion, did you have a thought about what the timeline is?
To complete the testing?
Yeah.
I had January 2023 in my mind. You know, if people were to use ESSER funds, it gives them a little extra time. You know, you're basically talking.
It's just testing.
It's testing. It's May now. It's basically 20. What's that?
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. Go ahead, Senator Perschlick. The floor is yours. Everybody just hold on. Senator Perschlick's got something. You go ahead. Go ahead, Senator Perschlick. I'm sorry. wanted to just touch base on a personal issue, but you go ahead. I'll wait until after we're all set. I don't even know why you're waiting to raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Well, I thought, I don't know what Mr. Englander said about the wintertime testing. If we wanted to, instead of a January, have like a March, if it's going to be the next 3 winters, basically. I guess that would only give them 1 winter. I don't know enough about if that's just the recommended or you have to do it in the winter. So we could give them 2 winters to do it. And I think it's a good point that where the total number might be $1 million, each school is like $5,000. So
Right.
as far as impacting the property tax, it's $5,000 per school. So
One time, I mean, yeah. And then the question is like remediation. But if you're thinking 2 winters, so we're giving them this winter and then sort of December and January of the following winter would bring us to January 2023, which might be enough December, January time. Senator Chinden?
So on the point Senator Perschlick just raised, I wonder if that unfunded mandate path where the school districts have to do it might also reduce that $1.5 million estimate, because we wouldn't be hiring a centralized agency of education coordinator and instead just putting it on the schools to figure out how to cram it into their already existing staff load. But I don't know if
That's a really great point. That could be reduced significantly. If you think about it, they said tests run $20-30 a pop. If you're getting even 100 tests in a school, you're right, that could be much less in terms of cost. Senator Hooker, Senator, go ahead, Senator Hooker.
Is there a way that we can direct schools to use their ESSER funds? I mean, if ESSER funds are available for this type of thing.
So what we would do is if AOE, federal AOE comes back and tells our state AOE that they can indeed use ESSER funds for this, then we would just put it in law that you have to do the testing, knowing that they would go ahead and use their ESSER funds to do it. And I'm not asking anybody to do any strange accounting here, but it does also beg the question if you were planning on using, if ESSER funds are now available for something that you were going to use for budgetary, something budgeted, does that free up funds to do this kind of work? And I don't know enough about school budgets to answer that question. So yeah, Senator Chinden.
how much time you want to spend on this, but my understanding with these ESSER discussions is there is a larger chunk of money that is going directly to each schools where they choose where to put the money. So in a way, I'm not trying to get creative with accounting either, but this seems to get at another underlying theme of these discussions, which is we as a state have an obligation to ensure the students have equitable access to educational opportunities, which I think also squarely falls in the category of safety in our schools, that it's justifiable for us to mandate to have an unfunded mandate to our schools to do this testing. And then if they can use those ESSER monies that go directly to them that they get decisions over, that should make it easier to swallow that unfunded mandate pill. So I support the path that you originally proposed, Chair Campion, of just requiring this and then having the school districts figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and I should have been clear. So we're not talking about using ESSER set-asides. We're talking right now just about this money that schools are on, that they do have, that they have been given, and to find out if they can use it for this reason. Okay. Anything else on this topic before we shift? Okay, I'll work with Ms. Wasserman. Schedule is a little clunky today, and I apologize because we're getting people when we can get them. So we won't have Ted Fisher back or here with us until 2:30. So that does give people a stretch. And reason that is the case is we can't get Ledge Council until 3:30, and we have to start with Ledge Council. Otherwise, we would have a more fluid time. So my sincere apologies. If senators could come back a little before 2:30, we will then pick up with H106 and hear from Ted Fisher And this, Ted will be coming into it with language and comments related to the agricultural component to H106. We'll then hear from Colin Robinson, who's come to an agreement with Jay Nichols on some language for H106. We'll have a committee discussion and hopefully try to, again, move that work this week. Okay, I'll be around if anybody needs anything, but we'll break until about 2:20.